Everything's a little rusty after a few weeks, you know. There are many ways that one can talk about an extended trip in which two seemingly sane adults live in an 8x20 box with a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, and an 11-year-old, especially one who thinks she's 17. But you might say that one of the verses that Ashley just so beautifully chanted is a wonderful way the Torah gives us words for such a trip. V'zacharta et kol haderech asher holechecha. Remember the long way that God has made you travel in the wilderness for such a long time. L'ma'an anotcha, that God might test you with hardships. Lada'at et asher bilvavecha, in order that we can learn what is in your hearts. Many of you have graciously asked about our travels, and I'll continue to share stories in the upcoming window, in our bulletin, and at the holidays, all for your pleasure and our shame. Tonight, I want to use these words from Torah about a journey, not about the one that I took, but about the one that I was able to observe from afar. The journey that you've taken, particularly as we thank Ashley, the journey that we've seen as she joined this congregation, led this congregation alongside Cantor Kathy, how she became our teacher, our preacher, our pastor, our rabbi. Most probably do not know that this summer was years in the making. Following her first year of rabbinical school, Ashley was our summer intern once before, while Cantor Kathy and I, along with many of you, went on our congregational trip to Israel. She had just returned. And so 3 years ago, if you can remember what life was like 3 years ago, when the idea of a sabbatical arose for me, the idea of bringing Ashley back to this congregation immediately arose as well. In fact, a little while after that, we did the math and realized that if I didn't take my sabbatical this summer in particular, that actually Ashley wouldn't be available because some congregation or Jewish organization is going to have hired her because she'll have been ordained a year from now from HUC. And so our plans were set. It would be so easy. A summer internship for 6 weeks as you enter your last year of rabbinical school, this should be a breeze. First of all, it's the summer. Congregational life is more casual. There are no b'nai mitzvah, likely no weddings, and often we come together outside for Shabbat to enjoy the sun as much as we might look forward to a sermon. Moreover, having completed 4/5 of her education in rabbinical school, serving pulpits across the country, we knew that Ashley would be more than prepared. V'zacharta et kol haderech asher holechecha. Remember the long way that God has made you travel in this wilderness. Rabbinic commentaries tell us that we remember the long route that our people took so that we should never be tempted by the easy route. For we are to remember that we survived the difficult one. Ashley was supposed to visit in person once a month for the 6 months leading up to this summer, but we were closed, more or less. So she taught classes and preached virtually. By the time she arrived, we were holding our first in-person services in ways we never would have imagined. B'nai Mitzvah had been postponed for over a year. In a matter of weeks, Ashley got to know 3 B'nai Mitzvah families and blessed their children on our bima. And then there was a series of losses, week after week. For some families, 2 losses in the Wall family, as we know, in a matter of days. And the loss of her own grandmother. V'zacharta et kol haderech, remember the long way that we have traveled. That this journey that God sends us on in the wilderness, it is longer than we could have planned it to be. Perhaps not in days, but in depth, in pain and in sorrow, in unexpected plans, in blessing kids who had waited a year to have what their peers had had, and to become the rabbi that they would remember forever. We are all tempted by the easy route. More often than not, it's a false path. As my rabbi taught me, and as the rabbinate reminds me daily, there are no real easy routes. Difficulty is inevitable no matter the path we choose. So choose knowing that you've already done difficult things, faced troubling times, and survived. Ashley, remember that you comforted others, that you'll comfort others in the future, perhaps who go through more painful things than we experienced this summer. But you did the hard thing, already comforting others while in the midst of your own mourning. You offered blessings to kids who barely knew you, but who now will forever remember you on the bima with them as their rabbi. You helped lead a congregation at a time when congregations did not know where they were going. And I have been told more than just a few times how fun it was to watch you in action. And so, Lama'an anotcha, you will be tested. What was this test? I want to pick on some of you, quote a little bit of what Ashley already shared, and then pick on the rabbis, us, at the same time. When I was a rabbi, some would call me the junior rabbi or the young rabbi or the new one. People would tell me what I've heard them telling Ashley. It's been wonderful to see how much you've grown, they would say. Well, I haven't grown since 5th grade. And all I could think in that moment was, boy, I must have been really bad the last time you heard me, because I don't think I've changed that much. It was sort of like when I see someone after a few years and they'd say to me, boy, you've lost weight, and knowing that I weigh exactly the weight that I weighed 5 years ago, I say, you just remember me as a lot fatter than I actually was. The rabbis tell us, Lama'an anotcha, that the tests that we face are not tests that we pass, not tests that we fail. They say that the test God refers to is the process of turning our potential into something actual, of taking our good intentions and making them into good actions. The reason it always bothered me that somebody would say, we've seen you grow so much, is because I didn't feel I'd grown at all. I had simply expressed what I had felt all along and never had the courage to say. As a rabbinical student and young rabbi, I just didn't feel I was growing. But I was becoming something I had thought about for far too long. I felt that what people were noticing were words and emotions that I'd had. And so it wasn't growth, it was actualization. It was me revealing what I had hidden for too long. That's how we passed the test. And all I kept hearing from people as I returned was that Ashley passed time and time again because they loved to note how they saw her, as I would say, come into herself. So it was fun to watch, not because we feel that we were seeing a child of our congregation become an adult, but because we were able to see that Ashley has a lot to give that has been bundled inside of her, like it is in all of us, good intentions that revealed themselves as good actions right before our eyes. And so now let me pick on us as rabbis and, quote, future colleague, Rabbi Barrett, we are wrong also. We are too sensitive, for we do grow. But not just because we work harder on a sermon, we grow, as she said, because we get closer to a congregation. The test is whether we can let that congregation change us, mold us, direct us to be a better servant of the Jewish people than we ever could have been on our own. So if Ashley has grown as a rabbi in your tenure, it is because she worked hard and because you let her into your life. As rabbis proud of our short stature, I think the two of us can say that this is the only way rabbis grow. The verse concludes, L'da'at et asher bilvavacha. we go on this journey that is longer and more difficult than expected. We pass our own tests in order to learn what was in our hearts. Ashley, when you spoke on the Shabbat of July 4th, you asked us to let the words of Micha Mocha be in our hearts next to the words of the Star-Spangled Banner, to celebrate our freedom not just as Americans, but as Jewish Americans, because you asked us to take pride in our freedom and to not take it for granted. You were asking us not to take it for granted because you showed us that you do not take it for granted. When you spoke of your love of Jewish camp, you reminded us that we should not be afraid of a world that seems to increasingly scare us, because you are not afraid of a world that increasingly scares us. You led us by showing us how you navigate these fear-filled times, inspired by this Jewish place that was such an important part of your life. You taught one Shabbat that the Torah believes deeply in the value of self-care because we are an Am Kodesh, a holy people. And you brought the biblical Ruth into the present day when you taught your Shavuot class on the leading Jewish women throughout the ages. To be a rabbi is to open up what you know to be true in your heart in the hopes of helping others. It is, every day, a personal venture. It is to share one's passions in the hopes that those passions can be shared among the Jewish people and that the Jewish people find them meaningful. It is to open oneself up, not just to share our learning, but to share our loves. And so, V'zacharta, we pray that you remember this journey, however long it may have been, or short it may have been with our congregation. That you remember the tests that you passed by letting your good intentions evolve into good actions. Lada'at et asher bilvavecha, and let us remember how you opened up your heart, shared your passions, shared your wisdom, in order that we were able to learn from you. We invite you now to join me and come close to Torah as we share this blessing over you. We pray that this next chapter for you is a wonderful 5th year and final year of rabbinical school. And then we pray that you find great meaning in every part of your rabbinate, wherever it takes you and wherever it takes your family. Please rise.